Did. Well, my next guest is Jason Brown. Now, Jason is a son-in-law to one of my good friends, Kathy Liggett, who I've had her on the show before. Precious woman of God. I love her. And you wrote a book, Margin Matters, How to Live on a Simple Budget and Crash Debt Forever. Now, you said this is perfect timing for this book. Speak on it.
So this is the timing of all this is really uncanny with you guys talking about the pandemic and everything. So there's no greater time in our history to get our finances in order, right? So just look what's going on right now with the pandemic, people losing their jobs, going on unemployment, having to depend on the government, which you do not want to do. First of all,
they haven't even got their unemployment yet.
Yeah, people, 26 million Americans can't even get unemployment.
Can't get their money.
It's crazy. So the book is basically, there's a lot of stories in the book, but basically I've gotten out of debt twice in my life. So first as a single, I was in my 20s, you're living alone, single. So I was $13,500 in debt. I was just starting out. I was making $23,000 a year, my first full-time job. And I just woke up one morning and I was like, you know what? This isn't right. Like, I'm not doing life right. I'm swiping the credit card for everything. This is, it's not working. Like, I'm getting into too much debt. I can't get out of it. So, I just started doing my own education, research, Dave Ramsey, people like that. I connected with my pastor, did a great program about finances, started reading everything, I could just to teach myself, because that's one of the problems in our country is that we don't teach people about money. It's not taught in schools. It's not taught it's not taught anywhere because money is a taboo topic. For whatever reason,
why?
You go into why? And that's one of the biggest questions in my book is like, why don't we talk about money, right? Why do we go into an office place and it's like, shh, no one's supposed to discuss their salary, right? Why do we go like, friends and family, like no one wants to talk about when they're in trouble financially, right? Everyone wants to act like they're doing well, like, oh, we're good, the car just got repossessed. No, we're good, everything's good, we're good, everything's fine. They want to pretend, but see, that's the biggest problem, is that money is still a taboo topic. And, I know in some schools they do teach money, but I'm telling you what, I have a master's degree. I went through every level of education, and I never was taught anything in school about how to balance a budget, how to do a checkbook, how to open a savings account, stuff like that. So the second story in my book about the debt-free story is when I got married. Now I was debt-free. I had dug myself out of debt, and I built up my savings. I was starting to get good with finances. And then I met my wife, and we got married, and she had $60,000 of student loan debt. Wow. So when we got married, I just told her, I said, look, I just went through this, and then let me tell you what I did. And then she took all the principles that I taught her, and she said, you know what, I'm 28 years old, and I'm going to be out of debt by my 30th birthday. That's my goal. And I said, okay, well, that's pretty aggressive. That means we're paying off $30,000 of debt each year over 2 years. And I said, that's going to be tough. But we made a lot of sacrifices. We weren't making a lot of money. We had a combined income of $60,000 at the time. This was, during the time we're coming out of that last recession, right? 2010, 2011, after the market crashed then. So no one was really making a lot of money back then. So, we changed our life. Like, people came to us and said, what are the first two questions that people ask when you get married? People ask, when are you going to buy a house? When are you going to have kids? That's what everybody asks. And we said, you know what? We're not buying a house. We're not having kids until we get out of debt. Now, we understand that we have that window to do it. Not everybody has that same opportunity. Some people already have kids or already have a house, a big mortgage. But we said, you know what? We're gonna put all that on hold for a little bit, and we want to get out of debt, and so we can start our life off, on a better, trajectory, right? We want to have a better financial future. We don't want to, keep going into debt, right? So basically, that's my book. My book, it's split up into parts, right? So the first half is just our story, and then the second part is just simplistic, like how do you create a simple budget? How do you create, how do you get out of debt? How do you save money? 80% of Americans, they're living paycheck to paycheck.
They're not saving it.
And something like 75% of Americans they don't even have a savings account. They don't have any savings, right? So that's the problem that we're in right now in our country with this pandemic, is that now everybody is forced, you're forced to rely on the government, right? And you don't want to do that, right? Because look what's happening. Now I'm not anti-government, I'm anti-relying on government.
Yes.
Because look what's happening. People can't get unemployment. Because the government doesn't have the staff or the resources to manage that volume of people that are applying for unemployment. People can't, you get furloughed or whatever, or a lot of people are just taking pay cuts, like me, I still have a job, but they're like, no raises, no one's getting raises, no one's getting, so that's the first, thing, right? And then, maybe furloughs will come. Then they're probably going to ask people to, all the executive leaders of my company, they've all taken 25% pay cut, that's the next thing. So the idea is, if you can manage your finances, then you can navigate through these waters, right? You can get through all this because you have the education to, manage your finances, responsibly, instead of just sitting back and saying, oh, I'll just go apply for unemployment. Well, look what's happening. People have been waiting for like 6 weeks to get an unemployment check. And then these stimulus checks that they're sending out. I mean, how long, there's people going to be waiting 2-3 months to, they can't even.
I didn't get it.
They can't, they can't pay.
Someone said, well, you must make too much money. No, I never had a direct deposit. If you haven't had a direct deposit, you didn't get it. Now, Tammy got it, and Chris, but if you didn't have a direct deposit, you didn't get it.
Right, that's right.
And so I'll have it when it's time. If not, I trust God.
Right, that's right.
That stimulus check isn't my.
Right, that's not.
And we don't make that much money.
And it's not going to be enough
God takes care of us.
And the check isn't going to really be enough to help that. I think most people like a single person would get the $1,200 check, right? Most mortgages are over $1,200.
Yeah.
That's not even enough to pay a monthly mortgage, much less food and all the other utilities.
We know somebody that got the check and went out and bought a large screen TV.
Well, that person needs to read my book. So that's exactly what we're talking about. Is that you have to make
sacrifices.
You have to change. So right now, like, this is the greatest red flag of our lifetime to change your mindset, right? So there's a great quote that says, money does not solve money problems, right? Because so much of it is psychological, it's behavior modification, it's changing your mindset, it's learning how to differentiate between needs and wants. That's the biggest trick, right? That's what you just talking about, the person buying the TV. Their mind tricked them into thinking that TV was a need, not a want, right? Like the new iPhone, you got your phone, like
it's not the
you
new
got your
one.
phone, right? But the perfectly good phone. But your mind, you'll be, oh, I got to go get the new iPhone. It's whatever, $1,500. But your phone works perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So that's where you separate the need from the want. It's like, well, do I need it or do I want it? So that's one of the biggest things I talk about in my book is a lot of money stuff is it's really psychological. It's really behavior. It's changing your behavior, right? So
I had a drastic change of behavior.
Yeah.
We went 8 years without a salary, no credit card, no bank account, no checking account, just trusted God for everything while we walked the cross. That's how I learned.
Amazing.
I mean, in business, I didn't have that ability. I didn't learn it like this. And that's why I said, we're not going in debt. God's going to pay for this building. I am not going in debt. We haven't all these years, all these times, gone and buy something on debt.
Right.
We pay cash or we don't get to be able to have it.
Right.
Now, if there's an emergency, sometimes we had to get it, but we paid it off within the 30 days.
Right.
But
right.
Let me just tell you something else. Tammy's daddy always said to me, if you do not have the money to pay cash for it, then don't buy it.
That's right.
And we never did.
And see, those principles are lost.
Yeah.
And see, I actually wrote a blog on my website about my grandfather. He's passed away. He lived till he was 92. It was my father's father. And in the 1950s, he bought a house. He built a house in Central Florida, and he wanted to add land to it. He wanted to have a citrus grove. So what he did was he had a Maxwell house coffee can, like the old tin cup, and he saved all his loose change and all his loose money. Every day he came home from work, he had this can in his kitchen, and he just put all his change in there, dollar bills, change, everything. And so what he did was he bought a parcel of land at a time over a course of years, right? So what he would do, he would take that can, and he would put the lid on it, and he would physically take it to the landowner and said, here. He would hand it to him and say, I want another parcel of land. He did that over a course of years, and then till he had about 3.5 acres of land. So he lived on this big, giant, citrus farm.
3.5 acres.
Yeah, he ended up with 3.5 acres of land.
That's not much land.
It's not much, but there,
I mean,
he had
trees on it.
But buying it a parcel at a time.
Yeah.
It took its. So the principle is, like you're saying, he didn't go into debt. He didn't, barter. He didn't trade. He said, you know what? I'm going to save up a portion at a time, and I'm going to pay for it in cash, and I'm not going to go into debt. So those are principles that that's how people lived back. This was like in the 1950s, right? So back then, you look at life in the 1950s.
Simple.
There weren't. Credit cards didn't exist.
No.
There was no the only debt that people went into was, for a large purchase like a house or a car, maybe a boat, something like that, right? But how did you get the money, right? How did you get a loan? You had to physically get in your car, drive to a bank, sit down, make an appointment, sit down with the bank representative and fill out an application. It's completely different. Today, you just go online and, make a couple clicks and, you're getting a, $20,000 loan or what. Yeah. It's insane how our culture has changed and how they look at, money and debt versus, you don't have to go back that far to see how different people's lives were.
Well, I want to tell you about Tammy and Chris. I was trying to get Tammy up here to tell, because I don't want to say it wrong.
Oh, of course.
But they take the children and they give them allowance.
Right.
And then out of that allowance, they have to put 10%.
That's right.
Into, like, say they got $20, then $2. I mean, 10% of 20 is $2.
Right.
Would go into God's money.
Of course, yeah.
They took it apart right away.
Right off the top.
Then they would put 10% into savings.
Perfect.
And then they would have what you can do with this now.
The rest,
they would talk to them about it. If you take the rest of this money and save it, you'll be able to buy something big if you want it.
That's right.
Or you can just keep building it up and saving it.
That's right.
But you cannot touch these other two.
That's right.
Now they're teaching them that.
That's beautiful. Beautiful
you need
principles.
to teach your children because if you do not teach your children a way to save, number one, give it to God. Number two, how many of you give to God?
That's right.
I mean, really. You say, well, I can't afford it. No, you'll never afford it because you never do it.
And I have a statistic in my book. You're talking about generosity and giving to God. And most Americans think they're way more generous than they are, but actually only 2% of Americans give away any type of money. Which is astonishing. That was some of the research that I did for the book, and I was like, wow, 2%. 2%, only 2% of Americans donate of any kind, in the church or whatever, a nonprofit, their favorite charity. Only 2% of Americans donate money, right? And what else is interesting is that the people who have less money, or the poorer people, donate more.
They do.
They donate more percentage-wise. They give away more money than someone who would make a six-figure or $1 million a year, which is that's kind of counterintuitive. But that's something that. But going back to teaching the kids. So I have 2 sons now. I have a 4-year-old and a 3-month-old baby boy, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is that I want them to
have a legacy.
I want to document our stories so they can learn. So what you're talking about, we've heard people do the jar system. Like you have the 3 jars. The tithe, or give away the 10%. Then you have the savings. Then you have the rest. Or you can do the envelopes. Some people have the envelope system, and they'll write on the envelopes. But yeah, that's one thing I haven't. The first thing I want to do with my older son, he just turned 4, is to teach him. I was telling my wife this. I said, I want to go to the bank or whatever and get all the denominations of the money, right? Like a $1 bill, $5 bill, $10 bill, 20, etc., and all the change, and to teach him, to learn, to learn what they are and what the value is, and how to identify. Oh, that's a quarter. Oh, that's a $5 bill, and to
Takes
teach
this
him
many to make
right,
$1.
Exactly, to teach him. This one has more value than this one. So that's kind of my idea of the first step of teaching him what do I do with money? Like, how do I handle it? Because
and they know it for.
That's right. He already knows. Yeah, he knows all the change. Of course, he hasn't seen $100 bill. He's seen $1 bills and $5 bills and stuff. But that's the kind of stuff that you teach these kids early. You teach those principles, and that's going to carry with them, into their adolescence, into their adulthood, and that's what's lost on most of Americans is that they were never they were never taught by their parents, or taught anything in school, just basic core principles, and this is what really just, you're talking about waking up at 3 in the morning. This is what I wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about is, what would our world look like, our society look like if everybody knew how to manage money, right? Like there would be, credit card industry would not exist.
No.
Like people would not, rely on credit cards. You can go get your loan. Of course, everyone needs a mortgage for a house. Not everyone can, spend cash on a house. But our whole society would be different. People would not have to be racing out to get unemployment. They could live for 3 months.
I did it for 8 years.
Yeah, you did it for 8 years. Yeah, so that's
no credit card, no
example.
cash, no bank account, no salary.
Nothing. Yeah.
For 8 years.
That's
just
astonishing.
trusting God.
Yeah. That's
and
amazing.
even in the 8 years while we were walking, we walked the cross for 8 years, and while we were doing that, I would find money on the ground.
Is that right?
And and somebody one time went by and they saw a dime laying there. I said, pick it up. And they said, no. And I said, if you don't honor money, it won't honor you.
That's right. That's right.
And so I picked it up, the change, but that change many times carried us through. Now, we had 3 people on the road. We had, the last year, 4 people on the road with gas for a car that would drive ahead of us, and meals.
Right.
And God just took care of us.
That's amazing.
You know why? Because we took whatever was given us and gave that 10% plus offerings.
That's right.
One night we had no food, nothing, and I remember we went to this church and they gave us $125. Well, that was great. We were going to go out and have some money for eating, for gas for the car. Everything was wonderful, and the Lord said, give that 100 back to the church for their street ministry.
Right.
You keep the 25.
Okay.
And I said, okay. And that night, someone took us out to eat. I mean, God always took care of us.
That's right.
And He'll always take care of you.
My wife always says you can never outgive God.
No, you
so
can't.
That's a perfect example right there.
You can't. This book, I think everybody should have. This should be like a Bible in your house.
I agree.
You need to have this. Margin matters. How to live on a simple budget and crash debt forever. Debt is a killer. Many people will commit suicide over debt. So we have it. It's $15. We have them here right now. You need to get this book. If you have any kind of money problems, which many people do right now, this is a wonderful book that will help you to learn how to get out of debt and stay out of debt.